Greetings everyone, I'm Detective STARBORN, and I'm glad to see you on my YouTube channel. Please be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on new and interesting videos. Thank you and enjoy watching. A woman from a small town put her daughters to bed, but when she went to wake them up the next morning, one of the girls was missing. The police immediately became involved, and from the first hours of the investigation, detectives discovered a series of suspicious leads. They soon managed to find out what really happened to the girl, but no one was prepared for such an ending. Jersey Bridgeman was born on November 14, 2006, in the small American city of Bentonville, Arkansas. When she was 3 years old, she got a younger sister, but shortly after her birth, their parents decided to divorce. Despite this, Jersey spent quite a lot of time with her father. Soon after the divorce, he married another woman, and they had 2 children. The man lived in a neighboring town just a couple of minutes away, so the girl often stayed at their house for several days before returning to her mom. In 2012, when Jersey was 5, they moved to a new house in the same city. The girls quickly became friends with the neighborhood children, and their mother's best friend lived just a few dozen yards away, so both families spent a lot of time together and were practically like relatives. On November 19, 2012, less than a week after Jersey's birthday, her mom was working the evening shift at the supermarket as usual. On such days, she sometimes left the girls with her friend when their grandparents were busy. The friend didn't mind watching them, especially given that her own children were friends with the girls. That day, the woman finished her shift at 11:30, took the girls home, and put them to bed. Jersey fell asleep immediately, but the younger girl asked to sleep with her mom, so the woman took her from the children's room. Waking up at 6:30, the mom went to wake Jersey for school, but she wasn't in the room. The woman began searching the entire house and quickly realized the girl was nowhere to be found. She called her mother and said she couldn't find Jersey. Her mother suggested that the girl might be hiding somewhere and told her to check closets and other places where she might theoretically fit. The mother searched the entire house again, but still couldn't find her. She looked outside and saw her friend sitting on the porch of her house. The woman hoped that Jersey might have woken up earlier and gone to her house. The girl was friends with her children and spent quite a lot of time visiting them. However, the friend said Jersey hadn't come to them and began helping her mother search. They checked the street and the friend looked in her house, but Jersey was nowhere to be found. Finally, her mom began to panic and decided to contact the police immediately. Officers arrived at the scene within minutes and immediately began searching. They inspected the house to make sure Jersey wasn't really there and also checked the neighbor's house with her permission. In parallel, officers went to check nearby streets in case the girl had left the house and gone somewhere. During the search, they noticed a small house that bordered Jersey's mom's property. The police became interested in it because one of the doors was ajar. They found out that no one lived there and immediately requested a warrant to search it. Investigators suspected that the girl might have gone in there, and the judge quickly gave them permission to enter the house. Police officers checked all the rooms and found no traces of Jersey. But when one of them decided to look in the closet in the bedroom, a horrific sight opened before him. Inside was the girl's body, and it took the officer just one glance to realize she was already dead. Her clothes were missing, and based on visual signs, investigators presumed the cause of death was strangulation. The body was sent to medical examiners, and the police began their investigation. Speaking with the victim's mother, they learned that that night, the woman had left one of the entrance doors unlocked. She added that she did this quite often, as her boyfriend worked the night shift and sometimes came to sleep at her house. He didn't have a key, and so the woman simply left one of the doors unlocked so he wouldn't have to wake her. She also added that the man hadn't come that night, and the police immediately became interested in him as a suspect. Given that someone had led the girl to that abandoned house, she must have known this person well. Her mother's boyfriend got along very well with Jersey and her younger sister. When he came to their house, the man spent a lot of time with the girls, and they both trusted him. While investigators were checking where he was that night, they discovered something else. It turned out that about a year before this, the victim's biological father had faced quite serious charges. In December 2011, Jersey was spending time at her father's house with his new wife. At that time, an acquaintance came to visit them for several days, and one day he heard a child crying coming from a closed room. This guest decided to go check if everything was all right. Opening the bedroom door, he saw Jersey there. The girl had a dog collar on her leg, tied to the leg of a closet. The room itself was filled with dirty clothes and was in complete disarray. Shocked by this sight, the guest freed the girl and immediately reported what he had seen to the police. Officers immediately arrested Jersey's father and his wife. During their conversation with the police, they said they tied up the girl at night for her own safety, claiming she would sleepwalk and try to reach some medicines, and also leave the house in the middle of the night. When they were asked why they hadn't bought special child safety equipment instead, Jersey's father replied that they were having financial difficulties. However, during further investigation, police officers established that her father had recently been using illegal substances, and he had plenty of money for those. Moreover, he wasn't working anywhere, despite the fact that he and his wife needed to support 2 other children. Investigators talked to Jersey herself, and she revealed the true reason why they started tying her to the closet. It turned out that one day, she went to the kitchen and ate several pieces of pie without permission, for which her father and stepmother decided to punish her in this way. She also said that sometimes the adults would force her to sleep on the floor of their bedroom, and she didn't even have the opportunity to go to the bathroom. Eventually, Jersey's father and his wife faced a series of charges, and the man received 18 years in prison, while the woman was sentenced to 12 years. Since then, the girl had lived with her mom, who didn't have the slightest idea about what was happening, as her daughter was afraid to tell anyone about it. This story understandably interested the detectives, but they quickly established that since his arrest, the father had been in prison, so he couldn't have possibly been in his daughter's house that night. Investigators also quickly checked all people living within a radius of several miles who had been convicted of violent crimes. They all provided alibis, and the police once again shifted their focus to people from Jersey's close circle. By that time, medical examiners had prepared a preliminary report and confirmed that the cause of death was strangulation. In addition, they found signs of assault and collected a biological sample from the perpetrator. It was sent to the laboratory for DNA analysis while detectives began checking Jersey's mom's boyfriend. The man stated that he had been working at the store that night and his shift ended closer to morning. Police studied the surveillance camera footage from the premises and confirmed that he was telling the truth. However, there was one nuance. Investigators found out that the man had had a break, and theoretically, he could have committed this crime since the store was just a few minutes away from Jersey's house. Nevertheless, his colleagues told the police that he hadn't left the store during his break, so the man was crossed off the list of suspects. Finally, the man shared an interesting observation with the detectives. He told them that at around 3 o'clock in the morning, a man named Zachary, Jersey's mother's neighbor and her best friend's husband, came into the store. He said he had a stomachache, bought medicine, and left. Given that the crime was apparently committed around this same time, the police became interested in this account. They had already talked to Zachary and his wife, as well as inspected their house, but hadn't found any leads. The man himself hadn't aroused any suspicion in them, but after learning about his nighttime visit to the store, the detectives decided to talk to him again. The man confirmed that that night he really couldn't sleep because of stomach pain, so he decided to go get medicine. After returning home, he eventually fell asleep and got up around 6:30 in the morning to get his older son ready for school. He also agreed to voluntarily provide police with his fingerprints, DNA sample, and the clothes he had worn to the store that night. Zachary insisted he would never harm Jersey, and the police believed he was telling them the truth. While investigators waited for the DNA test results, they decided to study Zachary more thoroughly and found several interesting points. First, the man had quite an extensive criminal history, but it consisted of non-violent and relatively minor crimes. Second, Zachary had a very troubled past. Police found out that the man had suffered abuse from his relatives, including his stepfather, biological mother, and brother, in almost every possible form for many years. During all that time, 13 reports had been filed with the police from people who noticed this and wanted to help. However, in Zachary's case, for some reason, they took practically no action. Detectives decided to talk to Jersey's mom to learn more about Zachary. The woman said that he and his wife had always helped her look after the children and got along very well with them. Jersey and her sister even called him Uncle Zack. He was essentially like a relative to them, as the girls visited his house almost every day. The mother added that Zachary and his wife also had keys to her house. Given the fact that Jersey apparently trusted Zachary unconditionally and would have gone anywhere with him without any questions, investigators began to consider his possible involvement. They were also troubled by the man's trip to the store in the middle of the night. They suspected that this could have been nothing more than an attempt to create an alibi through witnesses and surveillance cameras. Detectives decided to talk to Zachary again, but this time, the man suddenly stated that he wasn't going to talk to them without a lawyer. This was very strange, since just recently he had been willingly cooperating with the investigation and doing everything they asked. In the end, investigators could only wait for the test results to come back while trying to find any new leads. However, they soon faced quite an unexpected turn of events. Zachary, who had initially refused to talk to the police, called them and said he was ready to take a polygraph test to clear his name. The police organized the interrogation that same day, but the results spoke entirely against Zachary. The polygraph operator concluded that the vast majority of answers showed signs of deception. Thus, detectives began to suspect the man even more, but they still needed evidence. They also found out that Zachary had decided to come in for questioning under pressure from his wife. Apparently, the woman also doubted his honesty and said that if he didn't go for the interrogation, she would take the children and leave home. Soon after Zachary failed the polygraph test, he took another highly suspicious step. The man posted on his social media that he had made a huge mistake that would ruin his life. To the detectives, this post looked like another confirmation of his guilt, but they still needed evidence. The results from the laboratory came back on November 26th, 6 days after the murder. The funeral was scheduled for that same day, and Zachary and his wife were planning to attend. Experts had extracted a DNA profile from the biological material on the victim's body and examined all of the man's clothing. The results were quite expected for the police. Jersey's DNA was found on almost all of Zachary's clothes, and the biological material from her body also belonged to him. Eventually, detectives obtained a warrant for his arrest and detained the man in front of the church where the farewell ceremony was to take place. When they brought him in for questioning, he continued to deny his guilt. But after investigators told him about the test results, the man finally confessed to everything. According to him, that night he really did wake up with stomach pain and started looking for medicine, but there wasn't any in his house, so he decided to go to Jersey's mother's house. For him and his wife, this wasn't unusual. They both regularly went there to get any missing medications from her medicine cabinet. Plus, Zachary knew that the woman hadn't locked one of the entrance doors, so he didn't even need to wake her up. Once inside the house, he noticed that Jersey's bedroom door was ajar and decided to go in there. According to Zachary, he had absolutely no motive, and he insisted that he himself didn't understand why he went there. The man woke her up and called her to come with him. Jersey, who trusted him like a relative, immediately went with him, and Zachary led her to that abandoned house. There he committed his monstrous crime and left, leaving the victim's body in the closet. After what he had done, Zachary walked to the store, bought stomach medicine, and returned home, where he calmly fell asleep. The next morning, he acted as if nothing had happened, joined the search for the girl, and pretended he wanted to help find her. Zachary also added that he hadn't planned this crime and committed it completely spontaneously, although these words raised doubts. But the detectives were absolutely certain about everything else in his story, as he named numerous highly accurate facts. At that time, the police were keeping almost all the details of what happened secret, even from her mother. Therefore, Zachary couldn't have learned all this in any other way. Eventually, the man was charged with murder and placed in jail to await trial. The prosecution announced that they planned to seek the death penalty. As for his attorney, he decided not even to try to prove the man's innocence, as this seemed practically impossible with his confession and irrefutable evidence. Instead, he set a goal to ensure that Zachary would receive a prison sentence instead of execution. It's worth noting that shortly after the man was placed in prison, he was attacked by another inmate. However, Zachary didn't sustain any serious injuries, and since then, he has been under enhanced security. The trial began in spring of 2015, 2.5 years after the murder. Given that the man hadn't withdrawn his confession, everything happened very quickly. The court found him guilty and sentenced him to death, plus additionally 2 life sentences and 20 years on top. Before the sentencing, Zachary addressed Jersey's relatives. He said he sincerely regretted his actions and hoped they could someday forgive him, though the perpetrator's words didn't inspire much trust. As is usually the case in the United States, executions are almost always delayed for many years, and Zachary's case was no exception. The man has also repeatedly tried to appeal the verdict. Initially, he claimed that his first attorney hadn't even tried to exclude certain evidence from the case materials, and the jury had been improperly selected. Moreover, his new attorneys insisted that Zachary had serious mental health issues, as well as developmental delays. According to them, the 28-year-old man's brain corresponded to the development of an 8-year-old child, meaning he shouldn't bear full responsibility for his actions. Notably, even Zachary's biological mother, who had subjected him to various forms of abuse for years, spoke in his support. In one interview, she said she still loves her son and hopes that the attorneys will manage to overturn the sentence. Zachary's wife and the victim's mother's best friend also supported the appeal, even though she had previously condemned her husband's actions. Despite all this, their appeal was rejected, as independent experts refuted the attorney's claims. They acknowledged that Zachary did indeed have developmental issues, but he was more than capable of evaluating his actions and understanding that he was going to commit a serious crime. Currently, Zachary remains in prison and continues to appeal the sentence. The latest developments in this case were in early 2024, but his attorneys still cannot convince the court to overturn the execution, and the situation is unlikely to ever change. As for the victim's mother, she eventually married the man she had been dating at the time of the incident, and they had a daughter. The woman regrets that the girl will never know about Jersey and what a good big sister she could have been for her. Thank you for watching this video, and please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I look forward to your comments on this situation. That was Detective STARBORN. See you soon.